discussed this with Dr. Jabrin, sought his permission if I could recycle the same one today. And our idea was that sometime the messages get lost and we do not remember them. So Abdullah Yusuf Ali, does everybody know who Abdullah Yusuf Ali was? Huh? You don't know. Okay. So the rest of them can leave and you can stay. You know who Abdullah Yusuf Ali was? You know Abdullah Yusuf Ali. Yeah.
Not personally.
Not personally.
He died on before.
Abdullah Yusuf Ali, you have certainly seen his name. His tafsir, the translation of tafsir of Quran, is Abdullah Yusuf Ali. We have it right there. Yeah. It is one of the most read translation and tafsir of the Quran in the English world. Much more than Pickthall and many others who have done more or less the same work, but on a lesser degree in English language. Up until 10 years ago, I did not know who he was. And I tried hard to find out. I wrote to, there is a printing press in Medina that they have reprinted this Quran, but they also took chances, advantages with the text and changed it. Right. So I think they should know who this man was. I never heard from them. It was only after a book on his life was published in Malaysia that when I saw that book, I realized that how great the man was and what a monumental work he had done for the Muslims. Should I use the word Muslim Ummah? Yeah. So my question I already asked, who was Abdullah Yusuf Ali? And I mentioned that I have seen this one book which is on your left, Searching for Solace. That came, it's a Sharif, somebody by name of Sharif who wrote it from Malaysia. And then there was another book, Abdullah Yusuf Ali, A Life Forlorn, K. Aziz. To best of my knowledge, these are the only two books. Now, consider the scholars in Islam who have done some great work, and there's so much written about them. But this man, for all practical purposes, remained obscure and not people know about him. So my purpose will be today to talk about his early life in India, then London, then talk about he as a senior civil servant in the employment of the government of British India, talk about his personal life, services in one of the princely states of India, Hyderabad. We know some people who are our dear members from Hyderabad. That is another topic that I think sometimes we should address, that what role Hyderabad played. And this is, I'm talking about going back to the 20s and 30s. and maybe late 1800s in the Muslim world, that one state in India, the role they played. So I was talking about his days at the Islamia College, Lahore, where he began the monumental work that which is known, and then afterwards World War II years, and then a faded star that nobody knew who he was when he died in a most difficult circumstances in London. He was born in 1878 in India to Muslim Bohra Shia family. Bohra is a sect of the Shia, and that is in India and in Pakistan, Bohras. Finished Quran at age 5. Anjuman Islam school in Mumbai that he attended, and incidentally, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, was his classmate in that school. They went to school together, and it will be interesting to see how their lives diverged. And they never saw eye to eye. But in that little school in Bombay, the founder of Pakistan and the translator of Quran were, as little boys, classmates. He did his bachelor's from Bombay University, now is a Mumbai University, in 1891, and studied law at Cambridge. And ICS is the Indian Civil Service Examination, which was a pinnacle for the brilliant young men. And I'm using the word men because at the time, women were not allowed to participate in these exams. And so he took part in that exam, and he passed with flying colors. When he came back after studying in England, came back to India, and now he has the ICS examination passed, which qualified him to become a civil servant. Then he served as a magistrate and revenue officer in United Provinces in India. And he was also a district and sessions judge. So really it's a very high position when you talk about the late 1800s for an Indian to achieve that position. And he also served as an under and deputy secretary in British India government. Returned to England in 1896, and at that time he was called to bar. This is an English term called called to bar, that you can pass the examination of law school, but unless you are certified by a well-recognized institution, you can practice law, but that elevates you. And the term they use in England is he was called to bar at Lincoln Inn. Lincoln Inn is not a hotel, just Holiday Inn. Lincoln Inn is a reputable institution. And many of the prominent lawyers in that time, they were called to bar at that particular very prestigious institution. And it's another coincidence of history that how many of you, other than Dr. Afridi, how many of you know about Muhammad Iqbal? Okay. And that thanks to Dr. Afridi, who has been teaching here and Majabin Islam, the poetry of Iqbal. So Iqbal and Jinnah and Abdullah Yusuf Ali all three were admitted to the Lincoln Inn, and their lives are intertwined in the politics of India and what happened in India. So it's interesting the three Muslims from the subcontinent received their law degree, if you will, from the same institution. He was a dedicated Anglophile. He liked everything about England and English. I mean, we know people like that. In Pakistan, we used to say this thing that, well, he has become Americanized, or he has become anglicized, or whatever. Uh, and the implication is that this person has become an Anglophile at the expense of his own culture, his own language, and his own religion. Because in our minds, it's always the two different things. How could some person will be Americanized and still be a Muslim deep in his heart, right? Same thing is if you're an Anglophile, you like everything about England and English. How could you be a Muslim? So, but he was a dedicated Anglophile. He traveled extensively to promote Great Britain. He was a sought after speaker. He was against political Islam. He was awarded the Commander of the Excellent Order of Britain, which is CBE, which is a one notch below the what is that when knighted, when you are knighted and you are called Sir so and so. This this was one notch below. So at that time he was known throughout the British Empire as a Muslim who had made it, and he was knowledgeable, and he maybe they did not know that how much love he had for his own religion and for our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and others. He went through two marriages, both with English women. In 1900, he married Teresa Mary Shadler. He brought his bride back to India. He was still serving in the government. But if you have known anything about the English society in India at the time, it was very racist. First of all, they did not accept anybody who was a non-English. Absolutely. Doesn't matter how good you were not accepted. No, you can go back to see the racist policies and attitudes in southern United States. It didn't matter how good you were, but if you were not white, you're not good enough. So he came back with a white woman, and you thought that would have been a ticket to him going into the society. No, 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 because she was married to a Indian, hence she was not accepted by the others. So they were not accepted, poor reception. He had 3 sons and 1 daughter from that marriage, and in 1912 they were divorced. Then in 1920, he married Gertrude Ann Mawe, also known as Masuma. That was the Muslim name given to her by him, Masuma. 1 son by name of Rashid, and again he became estranged from his wife, and that marriage also ended up in a divorce. So here he was married for the second time, did not work out. He comes back to India in 1922, he resigned. Unheard of. Somebody who has reached that pinnacle of power in British India for an Indian to resign. He did resign. Since he was known, and here I will bring in Nizam of Hyderabad, the ruler of Hyderabad, he heard about him and he called him. He was a great patron of Muslim causes, this ruler of Hyderabad. And then he made him a minister in his government. And his name was, by the way, Nizam Mir Usman Ali Khan. It's a fascinating story about how this Hyderabad state played a part in keeping the Muslim causes alive. Incidentally, they had opted to join Pakistan at the time of partition, but India would not allow it, and they just took over. He said, I believe in the progressive interpretation of the Quran. Abdullah Yusuf Ali said, I believe in the progressive interpretation of the Quran, in the need for understanding and explaining spiritual matters from different angles. It's a profound statement that he is looking at the Quran from different angles. Now, it's an understatement to say that it was a monumental work. It was a monumental work. And he worked on this project 1934 through 1937. That's when he was in Lahore as principal, the dean of the Islamia College, Lahore. He carried his manuscript wherever he went, visited all the places mentioned in the Quran. Whatever places are mentioned in the Quran, he visited to bring a context to what the Quran says. He will issue one juz, we call it in India and Pakistan, sipara. One juz, the 30th, the Quran is divided into 30 parts. So one part will be issued every few months. And the printers, Sheikh Muhammad Ashraf, published it. Since its publication, there have been 200 different editions, including the one which was done by Amana. I believe that's the name of the outfit in Saudi Arabia. And they changed some of his commentaries, which was a travesty. You never ever change anybody's original work without explaining and giving separately what it should be. But they changed it. And I mentioned this, that tampering with the original. No, we're not talking about the text of the Quran. That is sacred and that nobody can touch it. But the tafsir, the explanation, and the translation, that was tampered with by Amana, which is a Saudi Arabian outfit. He said that I collected books, material, visited places, undertook journeys, taken notes, sought the society of men, and tried to explore their thoughts and hearts in order to equip myself for the task. Just simple example will be the collectors of hadith. What high standards they place in front of them before they will accept a hadith. There were a lot more hadiths which were rejected because they did not come to the standard or level that these narrators of the hadith had established. Similarly, this man goes about and putting a standard for the translation and for the tafsir of the Quran. Here is a picture of this was issued every few months, one part, one juz. The Holy Quran, Allama Abdullah Yusuf Ali, and then there are some, you can read it. I cannot read it here, but you can read it. And here are the reviews, which were very fantastic reviews when it started coming out. But before I go there, I will tell you that I am fortunate, very lucky to have a complete set of the original issued in 1934. My father subscribed to at that time, and then every few months one juz will arrive in the mail, and I have original binding and the originals, except one part which is missing, and that was the first number one, and that contains mostly Surah Al-Baqarah. A friend borrowed it and never returned it. So I have put it some other jewels in that, but it doesn't fit in. Yeah. Never lent anything, any books to any friend. Could never see him back. Yeah. So this is interesting. He was on a tour of Canada, and there is an education organization at the time. They had invited him to come, and National Council of Education in Canada. And in Edmonton, Alberta, he inaugurated the first Canadian mosque. So they asked him that, what should we name this mosque? And it just popped out of his head. He says, Al-Rashid. Mind it, his son's name is Rashid. Al-Rashid Mosque. So that mosque was known as Al-Rashid Mosque. Now, unlike our government in America, Canadians are very good at preserving the past. And it doesn't have to be only Canadian. It could be past of any people, whether the Native Americans or Muslims or Jews or whatever, they do preserve. In Alberta, Edmonton, government has developed a park in which they have brought all these significant historic buildings, dismantled them and brought them and then erected them in their original form. Just like if you go to Greenfield Village that Henry Ford did, that he brought Edson home and laboratory and many other structures he brought to Greenfield Village and then put it together, reassemble them in this original form. So I had by the way, there is one lady, God bless her, Tima Simon. She was a 5-year-old girl, 6-year-old girl, when Abdullah Yusuf Ali came to Canada to inaugurate the mosque. She was there in that gathering. She shared that with me. Yeah, her family had gone there. So here is the mosque, Al-Rashid Mosque, which was the first mosque in Canada. And because of that historic significance, that mosque has been brought to this historic park, and it's there. So I visited that about 7 years ago. I wanted to see this mosque because I had heard that it is still preserved, but it was not preserved in the same place where it was built. It was taken to someplace else. So my friends took me there, and it is a quasi-functioning mosque. By that I mean you can go in and pray, but I don't believe they have regular services because this is a like a museum where the buildings are preserved. So it's not a functional mosque, but the structure is still there. And this is a little bit of history of this mosque. I will not go into the detail. You can read it if you will. It's available on the internet. This is the interior of the mosque. Very simple. And it's just exactly how it was at the time it was built. He also had a great sentiments about the Muslim causes. So imagine this is we're talking about in the 30s. And here is a poem he wrote on Palestine. And let me read it. What joys and sorrow, laughter, tears are woven in the web of life. What thrills of mingled hopes and fears. What tragic dreams of love and strife. What statecraft plots have scarred thy brow. O holy land of Palestine. O land of peace, say when and how in these strange days can peace be thine. One way alone can bring thee peace, that ancient rights be not suppressed. How beautiful! That ancient rights be not suppressed, that aliens from encroachment cease, and Quds be given its rightful rest. So compare this, which I said earlier, that he was an Anglophile. He liked everything about England and English and whatever. But deep in his heart, he was a Muslim. And it's evident by his sentiment about Palestine. This is before the establishment of Israel, before that, because he saw the policies which are being forced towards that end. A neglected, faded star. India was divided into India and Pakistan and got independence from Britain, while in undivided India, he was a star where the British government depended on him to tour the world and promote British causes. After the British gave independence to Indian subcontinent, he was of no use to the empire or to Great Britain. You would think that he would be of some use to the Muslims. Absolutely not. He was absolutely and totally neglected by the so-called leaders of the Muslim world, religious leaders of the Muslim world. Nothing. And which really angers me that not only they did not support him, but after his death, when they wanted to republish his tafsir and his translation, they tampered with it. And the person who chaired the committee was no other than Farooq, Ismail Farooqi. Go figure. Himself a scholar. I don't know if it was money or pressure or whatever, but I have another presentation in which I give where they have changed his original text. So He was a lonely man in London, living in a pension home, like a nursing home. And according to the reports by the nurses at the time was, he was sitting by himself and he was looking, gazing in the distance. Now, Pakistan embassy somehow found out that Abdullah Yusuf Ali was a patient and living a very unremarkable life. And two things happened. The ambassador sent somebody from the embassy to go and look after him. And he also wrote a letter to the Prime Minister of Pakistan asking permission that if he could put Abdullah Yusuf Ali on a stipend, so at least he will have little more money than what the pension as a Britisher he receives. That letter in those days, as you know, used to go by sea, took months to get there, and then get caught in the bureaucracy, and may take another few months that somebody will see it or act on it. In the meantime, there is one, in this last years, he lived in the Empire Club for Pensioners. He's alone, no visitor. When you have a lot of visitors, nobody remembers who visited you. But if you have one visit in many, many years, everybody remembers. And there was only one person, his name was Omar Abdullah, a young scholar from Cameroon, who came to visit him. I don't know the details of what the conversation was all about, but naturally that young scholar knew what this man had done, and it came to see him. In his last days, he was found on the street in bitter cold on December 9, 1953, confused. He was taken to Westminster Hospital in Chelsea, in London, and London County Council Institution for the Elderly, then at St. Stephen's Hospital. And that's where he died at age 81. Again, Pakistan embassy came and financed his burial. Otherwise, he would have been given a pauper's funeral, like they do it when there is nobody and there is no money. The government gives you the simplest funeral possible. But somebody from the embassy came, people from the embassy came and took part in funeral services. And he was. So M.A. Sharif, biographer, I said that he's from Malaysia. He says, it's beautiful quote. His life begin with promise. Imagine his career. He was a very high official in British government, a judge, deputy secretary in the government. I mean, no many Indians can reach that level. His life began with promise, swung between moments of darkness and summits, and ended in tragedy. He was buried in Brookwood Cemetery in Surrey, close to the Walking Mosque. And it's, again, I gave you a few coincidences during his biography. He was buried close to the grave of Marmaduke Pickthall, and other translator and person who has written the tafsir. But Pickthall was a Muslim convert, And his translation and tafsir is still considered as standard. But imagine two people buried in the same, very close to each other in the same graveyard. So that is, and I mentioned about Pakistan Embassy. So I always marvel at people like him that they went out of his way. I mean, he had all what any Indian would want: a good job, good education, recognition. But there was something in his heart which was not related with the education, the education that he received in England and all that thing. And that was understanding the Quran. And he spent God knows how many years doing that and left a beautiful legacy for all of us. I think that's the end of my presentation. I'll be glad to have any questions, answers. Can you turn the light on in the back there, please? Sarah.
Where did he learn his Arabic?
Some people say that he did not know Arabic language. Some people say that he did not know Arabic language. I doubt if anybody who could go so deeply into the meaning and the context of a language does not know. So he must have learned that privately because naturally, maybe in high school, he took Arabic as a subject. It was offered when I was a student, but you had an option to Persian or Arabic, one of the two. But when you come out of high school, your proficiency is nothing, really. Do I know that Persian which I took as a subject? No. So he must have studied himself and equipped himself with understanding the language. Do you have a microphone?
I can speak.
No, you never speak loud. You are a very soft-spoken person.
It's a remarkable presentation, obviously, to you, that you got so much information from about him. There is very little known about this person, no question about it. Did you come across any indication that he got in touch with Jinnah or Iqbal at any time? The one thing I've heard about him during my own reading is that Iqbal was very fond of him. And he wanted him to become the principal of Islamic College. How much Iqbal did for him, I don't know. But Iqbal was known that he would pick up the right person for the right job. And here he was picking up this fellow for the job of principal of Islamic College. And then at the same time, picked up Jinnah to lead the movement of creation of Pakistan. Did you come across any?
I came across, yes, but not about Jinnah. At the time of partition, he was in England. He was not in India when the country was given independence. He was against the partition. He did not want India to be divided. About Iqbal, yes, he was in the service of the Nizam of Hyderabad. I mentioned that when he resigned his job, government job, he was asked by Mir Osman Ali, the ruler of Hyderabad, to come to Hyderabad. And he became a revenue minister for that state. And after a few years, when he resigned, and I don't know for sure whether it was that Iqbal wanted him in Lahore or whether he resigned and then Iqbal heard about it and asked him. But his appointment as the principal, you can call dean, of Islamic College Lahore was because of Allama Iqbal. He brought him. and he protected him. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story about him when he was at Islamia. This is not what the Muslims do. So once he started his job as a principal, he was a good principal, and he was doing his work on the side on the Quran. And people started accusing him that he was doing work in office hours or whatever. Does that sound like Muslims? No. Do they? So he was brought to Islamic College, but then he, under duress, he left. Yeah. I think he had finished his job as the translation and tafsir of the Quran.
What about his affiliation with Bora Shiaism? Have they had anything to do with his reputation?
I'm sorry, say it.
The reputation of Yusuf Ali being a Bora Shia. I don't know how much you know about Bora Shia. I had a very good friend.
I do.
Yeah. I mean, they're not very staunch in Shia. They're not prejudiced like the Sunnis or anything, but they are Shia. No question about it. It's a very small segment, mostly in India, mostly in the Hyderabad area.
Not Hyderabad, in Bombay, in Karachi.
In Bombay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was this affiliation with the Bora Shiaism or that?
I don't know whether it was. I will not be surprised if it was in Lahore. But Iqbal was above those things, and Iqbal protected him and brought him to Lahore to run that college. I don't think it was, what I read about him was that there was the allegation that he was spending time on his research rather than on the college. So,
thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
As far as his Arabic is concerned, I think he was very well versed, not only in the language, but in the grammatical structures of sentences. I mean, if you know grammar like I do, you can see his commentary. And he does rely on the grammatical structures and the sequence of the ayat as they come and how he interpreted it. So he must have learned grammatical grammar quite well.
Yeah.
As-sarf wa nahu is very, very important in interpreting and understanding the Quran.
I think you're absolutely right, because taking Arabic as a subject in high school does not give you that background.
Now,
And I mean, just because he finished Quran by age 5, most kids do that in India and Pakistan and in the Arab world. Yeah, they do that. So that doesn't give you the comprehension of the language. And his language was not Arabic. His mother tongue was not Arabic. So he must have learned the Arabic language and learned it with some depth.
Yes. And
Yeah.
maybe from some people, like private classes. Yeah, for sure. He learned the Arabic language from someone. Maybe other time, maybe they don't have message like today, but maybe they know some Muslims or who came from Arab
Yeah.
countries. Yeah.
Well, stop right there. Arab countries do not have monopoly on Arabic language.
Some
I'm
students-
just saying this thing
yes.
because we people get very irritated when somebody tell us that it is the Arabs who, in Pakistan, and these schools which popped up during and after, before and after the Afghan war. What, to me, I consider them frivolous. But if you look back in history, there were places in India and also Pakistan when it became Pakistan. Deobandi, maybe you have heard of it. After the mutiny, in which the Indians rose against the British in 1857, the Muslims got together and he says, why is it that the God is punishing us? And they came to one conclusion, that we have moved away from what God told us to do. And they established a school called Deobandi in the city of Deoband. It is still flourishing. At the time, it was the center of knowledge. And there were so many in India. So I don't want to contradict you. What I'm saying is that look at also the perspective of the people who have adopted Islam for the past
And
1,000,
language also.
1,200 years. And a lot of work, scholarship goes on.
Yeah, most of them are not Arabs, like Bukhari and many scholars in history that even in Hadith,
Yeah.
they were not Arabs. They were from different,
Most
Like-
most of them are Persians.
yeah, Persians, yeah.
Yeah,
Most of
Yeah.
them-
Persians. And
Not but a lot of them. Yeah.
and Indians. I mean, let's not say that we had some ulama who really knew the stuff.
For this great scholar, because many people know that his translation in English, they use it, but they don't know about his life.
Mhm.
Can you just write some like little?
I did.
Yeah, and just put.
I did.
Okay, that's great.
It's an essay I wrote in 2 parts,
Okay,
and it's the Friday Times in Pakistan. I'll be glad to send you the link.
please, yeah.
I really have issue with naming the scholar Persian, the scholar. The Arab expanded the word of Islam throughout Asia, throughout the East, up to China. And there were Arab institutions and the Arabic language was there. So most of them studied there. Many of them went to Baghdad and studied. Many of them went to other Arab countries and studied the language. So by naming them Persian, this and that, I think you're diminishing the idea of separation. It doesn't matter. The Arabic language was really the main language at that time in many areas. The schools taught that. Even when they were in Spain, the Arabic language was one of the top. I mean, the scholars, the poets, the writers. But we're all in Arabic. It doesn't really matter where they were born. It was all basically an Islamic state. And I take issue with the idea of this is Persian and this is this and this is that.
Well, but the Persian. Oh, hold on. Let me disagree with you. But I will hide behind a chair. What you're saying is, in a way, is to minimize the accomplishments of the Persians as a people with their literature and with their language and with their culture.
No, I'm not.
Islam never homogenized the Islamic world. Never did. Only in the Arab countries, but never homogenized. They studied Islam on their own. And again, when somebody mentions about Persian, yeah, their contribution was enormous. India's contributions are enormous. But if we say this thing, remove the name Indian or Persian from them, I look at it, it also diminishes them. Because they are non-Arab speaking people Arabic language is a foreign language, but they excelled in knowing the language and the nuances, as you beautifully said about, grammar and everything else. If they understood and they did some scholarship, a good scholarship work in that one, I think that should be commendable in their own right.
We have to realize that the main language that was really studied, researched,
Mhm.
written about, was in the Arabic language. Therefore, the Islamic Arabic concept was the strongest, rather than having a sectarian type of a background. I mean, where did they all study? Many of them went to Baghdad, to Arab countries, and they studied. I mean, if you look at the Madani, many of them were not even born in Arab countries. So therefore, why do we have to use that? It really bothers me quite a bit.
I mean, we need to talk about further sometime over a nice cup of coffee. And
I'm not gonna change my mind, but that's okay.
well, Fatima, why doesn't that surprise me that you won't change your mind?
It really bothers me to
Yeah.
a great deal because technically speaking, most of the translations were done from all over the world in Arabic. And the studies of all philosophy, of medicine, of basically space, all kinds of things. Most of that research was done in Arabic, in the language. So whoever was interested in that topic, then they studied it in the Arabic language. You didn't study it as a Persian. You
Okay.
didn't study it as an
Yes.
Indian.
But what
The
should we
idea-
take away? What should we take away that the so and so was from Iran and he studied? I mean, we should not take that away.
But I think it's divisive.
It's not divisive.
It's divisive.
Oh my God, you look in the